Now, before I explain active and passive voice, it is important for you to familiarize yourself again on the tenses. It's important for you to understand how tenses works, because you are going to use tenses, verb tenses, when you are working with active and passive voice. Another important thing that you should know is that the verb tense does not change. Most of the time, students would think that active is something that is in the present tense, and then passive is something that is in the past tense, which is not the truth. That is not how it is. Active voice is something that is completely different. I'm going to explain to you how that is so. And also, passive doesn't necessarily mean past tense. Okay, let me get into it. First of all, you are going to have a full sentence. In a full sentence, you will have a subject, you'll have a verb tense, and then you'll also have an object. So, in the active, the voice is the form of a verb that shows whether the subject does something or has something done to it. A verb in the active voice when the subject or the sentences does something. For example, I'm going to give you an example here. The receptionist answered the telephone. So we know that the receptionist is the subject, and we also know that answered is our verb, and we know that the telephone is our object. So the whole sentence is in the active voice. Now, how do we change this sentence in the passive voice? And you must remember, I said the verb tense does not change. It doesn't become the past tense when you change it into passive voice. But it suddenly changes into active participle. So let's see. If you are changing it into the passive voice, a verb in the passive voice, when the subject of the sentence has something done to it by another person or a place or a thing. For example, the telephone was answered by the receptionist. So remember, in the active voice, our receptionist is the subject and answered is the verb. By is answered, the receptionist answered the telephone. Now, in the passive voice, the telephone takes up the place of the subject, and the subject suddenly changes and it goes to the back. So, the telephone, which was now our object, is beginning to be the subject. Was answered. Was answered. Why do we use was answered? Because in the first place, when you remember, when we spoke about the active voice, we said the receptionist answered. So already the verb is in the past, is in the past tense. So we are going to retain that verb in the past tense and still use it as is when we are using the passive voice. I hope it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, I'm going to give you activities. I'll be uploading them together with this video on WhatsApp. Please go through those activities and familiarize yourself again, and try by all means to understand. If you don't understand, I am more than available to assist you. So I hope you understand the narrative here, that in the active voice, the subject is doing something. The subject does something, or something is done to the subject. Okay? But in the passive voice, the subject of the sentence has something done to it by another person or a place or a thing. The telephone was answered by the receptionist. Okay, so for level 3, I know we've done this before, but I want you to remember what we have learned. So please try and do activity 3 for me. The whole activity 3 for me, which is on page 132. And for the level 4s, your activity is going to be on page 209. Your activities for the level 4s is on page 209. Do activity 24 for me. We will be doing corrections tomorrow around 12 o'clock. Thank you.